everyone, and welcome back to the paint booth today. We're going to go ahead and start another weathering series. This one's going to be a Conrail locomotive, a GP40-2, particular number being the 3346. This is an Atlas model that I kind of detailed up and added sound and LED lighting to here. Did some re-decaling and numbering. It was a different number originally. So we're going to go ahead and get the weathering process started on this one. Now, for this particular one, this is going to be a pretty heavy deal here. I'll get the picture up here. If I can remember to do it, I will overlay this in the video, but this is one of our prototype photos here. Only two of them I could find from the late 90s. One has a CSX patch, obviously, but just to give us a good idea of what this thing was looking like there towards the end of Conrail, which is what I'm modeling. So this is what we're going to be going with. We're going to be getting it kind of faded out and do a little bit of rust work on it today with the airbrush, but first things first, we're going to do some airbrushing. So for our fade coat, I'll be using this Vallejo Model Air Aged White. I take this stuff and I thin it down a good bit. Obviously, if you're trying this out at home, I would practice a little bit on another model to get your thinning value right. I tend to go a little bit on the thinned outside, and I'll just kind of layer it over a little bit harsher. And then once that's on there good, we'll come back and we'll hit it with a little bit of this Rail Brown from, it's a Badger Model Flex paint. And we'll just hit the trucks and the fuel tank and all that just to give us our base coat down and just get a good start to it. Might also throw a little bit of black up on the top here for the exhaust stack, but I'm going to see when I get to that point how I feel about doing that. Could always add that later on once we get all our powders and everything done before we do our final clear coat. But so far all I've done with this is put a clear coat on it to seal in the decals and the paint work and everything that I already did from detailing it. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the airbrushing. I'll throw some music in the background and speed it up a little bit so it doesn't take forever, but let's go ahead and get this airbrushing coat knocked out. So our airbrush coats are all dry now. We got a nice fade going on. Also got some good dirt on our truck frames, and whole underside here's got a nice coat of brown to it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of a wash to the side. This is a panel line wash from MIG products, I believe it is. It's MIG 116. This stuff is pretty nice for getting all your little detail lines and bringing all that stuff to the forefront and kind of making things making some of the detail show a little bit better. Now with this stuff, I find it's a little bit too thick right out of the bottle. So generally what I'll do is I'll almost split it 50-50 with some more thinner. And even still, when I'm using this stuff, I like to take and I'll like dip my brush in the bottle, come over, grab a little bit of thinner, and we're going to go ahead and we're just going to wipe it on. And what I'll do is I'll come back through with some more thinner just to kind of thin it out even more so. Just because this stuff's very, very potent. A little bit more strong than I care for, but overall, it does the job pretty nice. It's just you really got to thin it down when you use it, or else it'll really be almost a little bit too much, at least for what I go for. I kind of like this to be a little bit more of a subtle thing when you're doing these washes. Just kind of let it be, you know. I want it to bring out some of the lines, but I don't want them to be like really dark black lines. I want them to kind of have just a little bit there to them. So get a little thinner, get a little bit of a wash, and come in and just kind of brush it on the whole side. It's kind of important when you're doing this as well to have your model laying flat on its side. That way it'll keep it all from running to the bottom or to the top if you were trying to do this upside down. Don't ask me why you do that, but you know, we all do things different. So just make sure you get a good coat on the whole side. Now this side's gonna have to dry a little bit. And then always too as well, keep these Q-tips handy. When you get a little heavy in spots like on these handrail stanchions here, you just come in and just dab it off. You know, because the Q-tip will kind of absorb it pretty easily. So you just kind of put it there and it'll absorb it. Now the next little bit I'm going to do here, one of my little tricks I like to use, is I'll use a black wash for all of my side grills and all that. So this is another MIG enamel wash. This is MIG 1011 is what we got on this one. Now this stuff is very, very dark. But what I like about using this stuff is it's really good for like your grills, because you can just kind of lightly brush it on the top of it and it'll fill in all that space in between the fins of them. So say you had a model, you're modeling a locomotive that was freshly repainted, these grills will be kind of dark in between the little fins in the grill itself, but the fins will still have paint on them and still look pretty fresh. This is a really slick, easy way to get that look of the darkness in there without losing your fin detail, so it's all black. So these can be kind of nice. What I like to do is I'll just throw a coat on these and see how it dries and how it looks. And if anything, if I look at the prototype photo and feel like it needs to be completely black, I could always paint it with acrylics later on. But I always just kind of like to do this just while I'm already waiting for this thing for the wash to dry anyway on the side. I might as well go ahead and just throw a little bit in the grills too, because this is going to take probably 3-4 hours to dry. If I put it in front of a fan, it'd dry a little bit quicker, but I'm just going to let it sit here and air dry. And what I'll go ahead and do is I'll do the other side, and I'll come back when we start doing all of our acrylic hand painting, which will be doing all of our detail, little rust spots and all the fun jazz, as well as we'll use some Sharpie markers as well. I've kind of gotten into using those for doing some really fine detail stuff, and I really like how they come out. So I'll be back once this is dried up and the other side's ready to roll. Alright, so we have our wash coats have all dried now. And we got just a little bit of, you know, just a little bit in them latches and a little bit in between the door seams. That's all we were really looking for there. We weren't looking to get too carried away. Now, the next part I'm going to tackle here is we're going to start doing some of our hand painting. Now for this, we're going to start off by doing our couplers. If you are weathering a model and you haven't done your wheels, I recommend doing that now. Do the sides of your wheels and your couplers. I already did the wheels when I had this fully disassembled, so we don't got to worry about that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to paint my couplers, because they got a pretty good brown on them right now from the airbrush coat, but they don't have full coverage like what I'm looking for. So it's got a little bit of this burnt umber paint here. I'm going to throw that all over the coupler. So I've mentioned before, guys, I don't worry about the KDs functioning perfect, because a lot of times I end up losing the damn spring out of them things. I'm sure a few of you have had that problem as well, where you go to mess with them and the spring pops out, and I don't know about you guys, but I could never get the damn thing back in there. So normally I just paint these up solid and just manually couple and uncouple. It's, you know, just kind of the way she goes there. But we got that on there now. So the next little bit we're going to have to do here now is we're going to have to go ahead and paint our grills on the side, which we use a little bit of this Model Air black, flat black paint for inside the grills. Get a little bit of that out here. sure on the cardboard if it wants to come out of there. Sometimes this paint can be a little finicky, not wanting to... Or did I not even open? Maybe I didn't open this one yet. Oh, would you look at that? I didn't even open this one. Set that down there. So for the grills, all we're going to do here is we're just going to take our brush and literally just cover them up all the way. As you guys can kind of tell, this model is going to be a little bit more dirty. So I want these fins and everything to be completely filled up with black. I don't want any of the blue edge lines showing like I would if it was a freshly repainted unit. This unit, I believe, was repainted some point in the 80s. But I don't know for sure. Don't quote me or hold me on that, guys. So I want these grills completely and totally filled in. That's what we're going to do. Now, if this was a freshly repainted unit, our technique here with the wash would work out very well, but we're not going for that here. And then these fins I also want black as well. But it is much, much easier to do this when you already have that wash coat in there, because that wash coat just gives you a good base to go with. So then you can just worry about painting the fins that are sticking up. It's a lot easier than trying to get the paint down in there in between each fin. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off these grills, and then I'll come back when we start doing the first bit of our rust work here. Alright, so we have our grills all painted black now, as you can see here. Nice and dark, that's what we're going for there. We want them to look like they're full of soot and dirt and every other dang thing. So for the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get our coat of what I call our base rust coat down. This unit, as you can tell, was demoted to local service by the late 90s instead of pulling the trailer trains it was originally purchased for. So there's all sorts of rust all over pretty much every flat surface. I believe that has something to do with the brake shoes, if I remember right. But what we're going to do is we're going to come in, we're going to start painting everything that's flat, every little flat surface, this rust color. So I'm just going to come in and go to town on it. Like with the walkways and stuff, I'm not going to worry about getting too close to anything, because I don't want to start painting the sides of the long hood or anything else like I just did there, of course. See that real good there. But we're just going to kind of get in there and start painting everything with that. And that's going to give us our base coat for that we're going to build the rest of our rust layers on top of. Now, for those of you curious, it's very hard to do this with a camera floating right over your forehead. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and film this here. I'm going to speed it up and I'll put some music in the background, but this is kind of one of those kind of long, boring task parts of doing weathering, but is very important, at least in my opinion, for the overall finished product, just getting a good base coat in. So I'll go ahead and probably speed this up a little bit here and add some music in the background, make it a little more entertaining. was putting on our rust coat there. As you guys can kind of tell watching, I pretty much was just kind of getting it on there pretty dang good. Wasn't too concerned about if I got anywhere I shouldn't, because as y'all can tell, I just take a Q-tip and wipe it off. Like when I got a little bit down over in here that I didn't mean to have, just took a Q-tip, wiped it off, and it ain't going to be perfect, but at the end of the day, that's the beauty of weathering, is you're building layers, and we could always add a little bit something over top of that later, and it's all going to end up looking right in the end. So don't panic if you get a little carried away and you get paint where you shouldn't. Just wipe it off with the Q-tip and chalk it up to being more of just a little more weathering when it's all said and done. So we're going to let this dry for a while, and then we'll come back and start doing some of our hand painting and some of our wiping techniques and little stuff to start bringing this thing alive. Alright, so our basic rust coat's kind of dried on here pretty good now. So what I'm going to go ahead and get into here next is I've got this Sharpie fine tip silver paint marker here. I don't know what kind of paint it is or any of that, but I've been using this quite a bit here lately. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to start doing some of my little detail work here. Like on these little cylinders for the brakes. Just come in and get a little bit of silver in on there. And then too, what you could always do if you want to is some of these little bolt head bits, you can go ahead and just get a little bit on top of those and kind of make them kind of pop a little bit and make it look like maybe somebody was working on this unit and parts are replaced, all that. You just kind of come in and find little spots you want to add that to there. Make it look like some new parts are put on there. Maybe a new door hinge on the long hood here and there. We'll get to that here in a second. But, you know, just take it and use it in some spots. It also works good for painting the ends of the MU hoses as well. So let's go ahead and, you know, we'll go ahead and we'll make this one here a new hinge. Let's get in there. Or a new door latch here. Let's get that one. We'll put a new one down here too. Don't have to be perfect, just, you know, get it in there. Maybe put a new hinge. We'll put one right here. So all you do is just, you know, paint your little hinges. And the thing is, if you just do these little, you know, minor details here and there, just kind of put that little stuff, that's what people kind of like pop to people. They'll see those little spots here and there, and they go, oh, that's kind of neat, you know. Like back here on the steps, you got the spot where when everybody's climbing up the steps, their boots rub on the back side of the steps, so that's always going to be worn away a little bit. Do that on the front and back. Hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm kind of trying to work underneath the camera here, but I have the camera to where it's pointed at everything, so I'm hoping it'll show up alright. Although, to be honest, I have no idea whether it is or not, so we'll find out during editing how that part looks. But let's get in, paint the little MU tips. You basically just go around and do this in different spots on the locomotive. So I'll go ahead and do that real quick, come back, and then we'll start doing a little bit more of the painting work. Alright, so I got all those little spots done with the silver marker. Now I'm going to go ahead over to my brown marker. And one thing I've found on a lot of these units is it seems like they get a lot of rust down here on the, kind of down here on the sill area, especially the hinges, etc. And with these fine point markers, you can really get in there and get a nice tight little rust line like what the real thing has. And that's really, you know, kind of what, it really helps to be able to make those fine lines and to, you know, do the hinges and the small stuff with it. So before I get any more paint on here, I know I just said I was going to start doing some painting, but I thought about, you know what, I ought to do this part first here. I'm going to come in, I'm just going to like trace the outside of some of these boxes and just kind of make a little faint little spots here and there. Just to kind of simulate some of that rust on the edges of everything that that pretty much all locomotives tend to get over time. I'm kind of just, I got my prototype photo in the background here that I'm just kind of referencing to give me an idea of about what it had and where it was at, etc. And then too, you could come in and you could do a few of the hinges in the brown as well, so that the hinges, or the latches. My brain's not working too well today, fellas, but just come in here and do the latches a little bit of this brown, get that going on. Now another thing you can kind of do with these markers that I like too is you kind of get a little bit of a kind of like little streak mark detail with them. Just kind of, you know, work it down. When you're coming off the hinges, you can just kind of add like little rust streak spots coming off of them. Don't have to be too heavy or anything, but just little tiny detail. That's what it's all about when it comes to weathering, is just doing these little minor things that when you add them all up, it makes it look more realistic, and really gives you a nice end result when you're done. I also like to kind of come into these handrails and just kind of, you know, get a little bit of brown marker on those too. Kind of like the paint's chipping off of them a bit. Come over here to our other side, and I'll flip our photo over to the opposite side here so I could see this. This one's got a lot of rust going on down here, so we'll really get heavy down here. Looks like the whole bottom of this door was pretty much, well, this panel was pretty well rusted out by, I think this photo's from either 98 or 99, so this was pretty well used. But as you can see, we're not getting too carried away. We're not making big passes. We're just adding a little bit at a time to just kind of give us a, you know, a little bit of a rust spot here and a rust spot there, and letting it build up. Let's get right by these hinges too. Of course, the hinges themselves aren't going to turn brown, but I'll get everything else brown in the process. Maybe I can get them that way. Now, a lot of what I'll do over here is going to be powder based, but I am going to do some kind of dry brushing too with the acrylic paint, just to kind of give it something to start with. But a lot of this is going to be just pounding this thing with chalk paint, with the weathering powders. Just hammering it with it, because it's going to need it. So what else could I add here? I'll put a little bit on the nose here too. Come up here and just kind of get a few little marks here and there, a couple little scrape marks on the corners. These little hinge doors in the front. The hinges always seem to rust on these too, I've noticed. And the latches also rust, so I'll just get a little bit in there. I think one of them I might do an outline on here, if I can get my marker in there. Now, I know some folks like to do their weathering with the handrails off and do it all like separate pieces, and I mean, that's pretty dang cool doing that way. But for me, I have a problem when I put these back together with everything already finished off and clear coated, with the like the paint and the weathering all coming off, and then I'm stuck with a model that's, you know, part way has this really nice partial weathering job because part of the paint and everything came off of it when I was trying to put it back together. So that's part of the reason I'll fight with the handrails here and there, and, you know, kind of maybe miss putting little extra into certain spots. But I'd rather, you know, have this where all I got to do when I'm done with this is pull the tape off, add the number boards and all the light lenses, and I'm good. So just a few little marks here and there, nothing crazy, just a little bit. I'll go ahead and kind of try and highlight. I wonder if I can get that from the top. Y'all probably won't be able to see it, but I'm gonna try and get the top of that. Yeah, that worked. Alright, let's see. Other than that, it looks like everything else is going to be acrylics. But anywho, let me go ahead and we'll get on over to our acrylic paints now. Alright, so now we get to have some real fun. I've went and got a little bit smaller brush than the one we were using earlier, and I still have my brown, my two browns, my rusty one, and my darker brown plus my black. What we're going to start off with here is we're going to do a little bit of kind of rust work up here at the top. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I kind of like to work with kind of dry brushing a bit and using that a little bit. I don't like to gob the paint on there too much. It's like I'm going to start up here by this dynamic brake area, and I could see quite a bit of rust in the photos, so I'm just going to kind of lightly kind of work that in around there a little bit. Not going to get too heavy, just kind of want to work it in this general area a little. Just to kind of fill it in a bit, because that's what the photo shows, so we're going to go ahead and just kind of work with that. That edge being a little bit rusted. We got a little kind of like rusted deal coming down like that up here as well. We got two of them. Looks like this door here's got probably a rusty patch, probably from the heat. Where else do we got here? And all back here by the rear radiator fan section also seems to have a good bit kind of up along this top edge here. Just kind of come in and kind of lightly touch that on there. Again, nothing too fancy, guys. I'm just going right off the photo and looking at it and matching up and just getting it close. I mean, trying to get every little swath of rust, if you will, perfect it's doable, but it's crazy if you're really gonna try to. Myself, I just don't have that much patience. I'm more than happy with close. So we'll come down here, and it looks like our tank here's got a little bit of a rust deal going on there. Now the fuel tank and the tank are going to be something pretty cool here, but before I get too far into that, let me go ahead and just get some of this brown here on our truck frames as well. I kind of like to, I'm not going to get too fancy with how I'm putting this on here. I'm just basically just kind of randomly putting it in spots, and the reason being is it just kind of will end up blending with our first brown we put on there, which was the rail brown, then the rust brown. This, when you put those all together with a little bit of the powder on top of that, it's gonna look awesome. But there's no real rhyme or reason other than just kind of putting it in little spots a little bit and trying to keep it even so everything's about the same. Let's see. I kind of want to put a little bit over here. I don't know if that might be, that's going to be too dark. Let me get the rust red for that. Just wipe that back down a little bit. That might be too bright, too dark too. We might have to do that with the powder. I think we'll do that with the powder. Alright. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a little bit of a rusty spot up here on the cab roof. I've noticed on some of the Dash 2 units, it seems like they got these rust spots on the cabs. I don't know if it's something with the way the structure is on the inside of them or something, but there's always like 3 of them. There's like 3 squares, so I would assume it has something to do with the construction of them. I'll kind of come in and get like these lines here too. Just kind of get a little brown on there. Get a little brown across this top edge too. Not too much though. Just kind of get that on there. A lot of weathering, for those of you that, you know, haven't really messed with it too much, is putting on paint, realizing you put on too much paint, and then dabbing it off with a Q-tip. That's really kind of the secret right there when you're doing this, is you kind of put some on there, and it looks good, and then you're kind of like, oh, that's too much. So then you start taking it off, and then it looks really good. I don't know why it works that way, but That's just kind of the way it works. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do this fuel tank here. As you guys can tell, I'm just literally just brushing on brown paint. Nothing fancy. Now again, my Q-tip. I'm going to come in, I'm just going to kind of wipe it off. Because we're going to come in with some black paint next and do the same dang thing. And it'll kind of give us a wavy look to it, which is exactly what we want. But the first part I'm going to do this little fuel streak right here by the fuel tank. And then we're just going to come in, and the real prototype here, it seems like it's kind of got the blacks kind of mixed in different spots here. It's really black, and then there's a lot of rust, and so the best way to kind of accomplish that when you're doing weathering is to just come in and put some brown on, and put some black on, and put some more brown on, and dab a little bit of everything off, and I'll kind of mix it all together and give you something about like that. Which, that's not bad, but that's not totally what I'm looking for. Yeah, that's pretty close to what I'm looking for right there for the tanks. We got a lot of rust going on, but then there's this section in the middle that's here is pretty clean. I think I'm going to throw a little bit more rust. I want it right about there. About there. We'll just kind of dab that out a little bit. It might have been too much, so we'll put a little more black back in. I'm surprised normally a lot of these, you kind of have the same thing going on with the air tank reservoir as well, but this one doesn't seem to have it so much. So let me go ahead and I'm going to do the same dang deal on the other side, not ramble for 10 minutes while I'm doing it. I'm just going to get it knocked out, and I'll come back when we're ready to do our powder work once all this is dry. Alright, so all of our acrylic paint work and marker work's now dry. So what we're going to go ahead and do next is use some weathering powders just to kind of tie everything together and kind of give us our final cover-up coat here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a bit of a dirt brown kind of color going on. This isn't the rust kind of color, but it's just kind of a dirt brown. I'll get some on my fan brush here, and I'm just going to come in and just start just basically covering up the truck side frames with it. As you guys can't tell, it's pretty faint, this stuff is, especially when you're using this type brush. So you got to kind of just work it in a little bit at a time, and it'll go ahead and cover everything up there a little bit at a time. Just keep on working that in. As you can hear there in the background, got a little work getting done here on the house today, so I have to pardon the background noise there. I didn't know about that until right before I started filming, so just gonna have to kind of bear with me here, fellas, while we knock some of this out. But this basic dirt color, I'm just kind of gonna come in and just kind of give everything a little bit of a coat with it. I don't want to get too carried away, but just get a nice base. And kind of just again referencing my prototype photos and using those to kind of tell me where I want to put it at and where I don't. So I'll go ahead and throw a little bit over here. Right now I'm just working with this fan brush. I'll come in with a different brush to get some of the other spots on this here. A little bit smaller brush to be a little bit more precise with where I'm putting this at. But for this base layer, I'm just kind of really just trying to get it on there pretty good. Because again, when you clear coat these with the powders on, it tends to really take a lot of the powder away. So we don't have to really worry about being too light with this, because a lot of it's going to go away with the clear coat. So I got that on there pretty good now. I think next I'm going to start kind of working in a little bit up here on this box cover up here in the front. Now again, that looks really heavy, but it will not dry that heavy. It will dry much lighter. I'll put a little bit up here on this nose too, just right down the side here. Get a little towards the top. Get a little up here on this cab roof. Now I'm not going to get too carried away with the flat surfaces just yet, because we will be coming back and doing those with a different color, like brown rust for that. So it's not super critical to get every little spot just yet. We're just kind of going to worry about some of the bigger spots here, so to speak. I'll get a little bit of this too. Alright, I'm happy with that. What's the other side look like? I have to come in and get a little in here. And get a little back here on the back top too. Again, just trying to blend everything together a little bit. That way there wasn't too big of a separation between the places that rusted and the places that didn't. It'll kind of tie in the darkness of the marker with everything else too as well. So let me go ahead and get all this up here. Now sometimes what I'll do is I'll take, as you guys can probably see what I'm doing here, is I'm kind of taking my brush and I'll dip it in the powders, and then I'll kind of wipe it off on some of my paper here underneath, and that just kind of gets it so it's not too much powder going on. Again, like I said, it's kind of hard to go a little bit too heavy with this, but at the same time, I don't want it to be a big spot either. So let me go ahead and blow this off real quick, and then I'll come in and we'll start hitting it with all of our rust red for all the brake dust. Alright, so we got all our excess dust kind of cleaned off now, so I've went ahead and loaded up some of the red, the like bright red brake dust stuff here, and I'm just going to start working this stuff in. It was quite heavy right in this region from the photos I've got, so we're going to work that in pretty strong right there. Kind of come in and fan it in. Get some in our smaller brush and just really nail that, because according to my photos, that's where it's really heavy at. So I'll go ahead and put quite a bit there, as well as we'll start kind of working it in our walkways too here. I'm sure y'all remember from earlier when I mentioned when we were painting our walkways, we didn't have to get them perfect because we were going to come back in with our powder, and this right here is why. Kind of get the bottoms of the doors and stuff, and just kind of really layer it in there good. This has also got a lot back here around our sill area. By the time we're done with this, it's going to look like I dang near painted this thing with this stuff, but trust me, when we put the clear coat on, I think I'm going to try and film that, and y'all can see how much it really does just fade away when you do the clear coat. So it pays to be a little bit heavy during this part, but not too heavy. Go in and start putting it on the roof good and hard too. And all of our walkways, gotta get some in there. Now I like the fan brush for just kind of being a bit of a lighter technique. For when I'm really trying to get this stuff in, I'll use a smaller brush like this to really be able to wipe it in good with the brush tip and really make sure that powder gets stuck in there and gets on there well. So that's looking good. Just keep on brushing that in. Again, we're just nailing these flat surfaces because this is where all that dust would have been sitting at on the locomotive in the real world. I'm not going to get too carried away by the exhaust housing because we're going to come back and actually airbrush that once the powders are clear coated on. We'll put a little soot on with some black paint. But first we got to get these powders good in here. I think I want to get a little bit more up here too. Just kind of put that all in there like so. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side here, and I'll come back for the last little bit, which will be a little bit of a black soot effect on the top. Alright, so we got our rust on the top now. Looking pretty good. Pretty happy with that. I also put just a little bit in the grills, just to kind of give them a little bit like they've been pulling some of that dusty dirtiness as this locomotive ran. So now we're going to get some black and put it on our fan brush again. And basically what we're going to do is we're just going to come up here on the top and just kind of hit the whole top of this thing, and it's going to kind of highlight some of the different detail on the top of the locomotive. That's pretty much what we're going for there. Just kind of to make some of the roof lines kind of stand out a little bit more and kind of give it that it's got soot all over it look. As I mentioned before, we're going to come back and airbrush an actual soot layer on the top, but this is more just to get some of the fine detail on the top to come out and come alive a little bit here, like these lines back here on the dynamic brake area. This will really kind of just make them pop a little bit over top of the rust color. So nothing fancy here though, fellas. We're just kind of pretty much just running it in there like so. No real technique to this other than using the fan brush and just kind of working it in a little bit at a time to get that dusty, dirty top look that you want. So I will go ahead and clean up all this, get everything set up to clear coat this, and then I'll clear coat it, and we'll be on to the final one. Well, I'll be on to where I do all the final stuff, and the next thing you guys should see is this getting clear coated and then running on the layout.